is Robby Sherwin. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised on a horse farm in Maryland. Moved to San Francisco the day I graduated from college. I currently live in Portland, Oregon, and split my time between there and Key West, so I sort of cover the country. I'm retired now. I've got a whole new line of profession. I've turned into a writer and a photographer. Later on in life, I did hotel management. I was a chef for many years, so I've covered the gamut. I was living on the corner of 19th and Castro Street in San Francisco when it first started. I moved to Castro Street in 1976, I believe. So I watched it unfold from the very beginning, and those were pretty scary times.
Code 3, room 200. I'm in the mayor's office.
As president of the Board of Supervisors, it's my duty to make this announcement. Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed. The suspect is Supervisor Dan White.
We were so thrilled to have gotten the first elected gay official in the United States in our city.
Market Street, a place called Alvy's. And the reason for all this merriment and gaiety, if you pardon the pun, is a man standing to my right, the first gay supervisor elected in San Francisco. His name is Harvey Milk.
We were so proud, but at the same time we were fighting something called the Briggs Initiative, which was a right-wing funded initiative that was trying to fire all known gay teachers out of the California teaching system. So we were fighting on many fronts all the time, but to have Harvey Milk, who was a guy I knew who had the local camera store on Castro Street, become an elected official was just a terrific, prideful period of time. And the night that he and the mayor were killed was like someone sticking a knife in your gut. That was before AIDS, actually. That was before HIV, before any of this. That was 1978. I remember distinctly the BAR, the Bay Area Reporter, which was the local paper, started publishing articles and then started publishing obituaries, and they would put the obituaries up on the windows of the drugstore on the corner of 18th and Castro, and it just kept growing to within 2 to 3 years. The entire windows were plastered with faces of people that you knew, and everyone that we knew was there eventually. I was a mid-20s person when I moved to San Francisco, and it was a playground. So I assumed, as did most of the men that I knew and were good friends of mine, that I was infected from the beginning. I didn't really have many doubts about that. I took the test early on in 1984, and I was not surprised at all. I think a lot of people went through horrible, horrible shocks when they got their test results back, and they started formulating ways for you to get your results. You had to have a person with you. You had to have a psychologist to talk to. I just got my results from my doctor and walked out and went home and thought, well, there it is. That's the confirmation that I sort of expected would come. Disclosure took a little bit longer. Health insurance was a big part of that. We were scared to death to be known or to say anything because we were afraid we'd lose our health insurance. So I think I was careful for a couple of years, but in all honesty, I'm a pretty upfront person. I am who I am, and I've never hidden the fact that I was gay. I never hid the fact that I was HIV positive. Disclosure comes in many forms, I find. I remember one instance, I went to a new dentist when I was living in Palm Springs. This would be in the mid to later 80s. And I disclosed it on my sign-up sheet on my medical record when I filled out the forms. And I was asked to leave the office and sent home. They wouldn't treat me. And that was probably one of the first times that I really got smacked in the face with disclosure. Like, wow, there are people who don't know how to deal with this. And I just hit a wall. I found over the arc of 30 years now, 35 years, that disclosure comes in waves, kind of like tides in an ocean. You have a a tide come in of disclosure issues with people and friends and family, and then it sort of ebbs and goes back out, and it's quiet for a while, and then another tide of disclosure comes in. So you deal with that every time, and as most things, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the less traumatic it is. I don't have anyone left to disclose to anymore. I do remember having the discussion with my mother and father and telling them that I was HIV positive, and in all honesty, I got a 6-month terminal diagnosis in 1988 and was told to put my affairs in order. I had cancer of the stomach and I was not going to live for long. So I had that hard conversation with my mother, but I remember telling her on the phone that night that I had had a great run. I was 30 years old. I had done everything I had wanted to do up to that point in my life, and I said, Mom, I'm good with this. You know, if I have to check out tomorrow, I have had a wonderful life, so don't feel bad for me. And I got involved very early in San Francisco with a group called the Stop AIDS Coalition, right when they founded. Before actually I even had a diagnosis, and I would stand on the corner of 18th and Castro in front of the Elephant Walk with a clipboard and sign guys up for safe sex seminars to teach them how to have safe sex and still be fully realized human beings. Talk about the fear that was permeating the community and the street, and talk about their own issues of fear for themselves and their families, and all the things that we're talking about, disclosure and doctors and medicine and dying and all of those issues, and then bring it back around to how do we continue to live? How do we continue to have sex? How do we continue to get partners? How do we do this and not be the Walking Dead, the traumatized Walking Dead that so many people were turning into? I was more concerned with protecting myself from getting anything else from someone and from passing it on, because we didn't know in those early days what the transmissibility of this disease was. I had been a serial dater all of my life, and I lived in a candy store, so why did I want to get married and settle down? I happened to meet this guy one night in a bar in Atlanta and took my breath away, and we had a whirlwind 6-week courtship, and he asked me to move in to his house in South Carolina. And I thought, I'm 40 years old, and I think this is it. I think I'm ready. So I remember really, that was one of the only times I've been frightened. I had to sit him down and have the talk and say, there's things we need to talk about. And I had to disclose my status, and his comment to me was, I'd rather have a year with you than a lifetime without you. He's still negative. 23 years later, I'm still positive. I think that there was probably a point in the mid to late 90s where I was getting pretty sick. My T cells were down to 147. I was considering naming them and keeping track. And then all of a sudden, the cocktail came on the market, and I was one of the first people to take advantage of it. And I just zoomed back and have never looked back. So